I was one of the luckiest kids in our high school that had the privilege of driving into school about halfway through the day. Our school day was divided into 9 periods, and because I had enough credits to graduate aside from a select few, I was always allowed to show up right before the 4th period. That was when my first class was. The day started out like any other. I woke up and got myself ready for school. I remember the steam pouring off my coffee cup was intense that morning, but the heat was a refreshing contrast to the cold bite of the winter air. I loaded everything up into my car and drove the 8 miles to get to my school. My phone kept going off, which was irritating because the notification sound kept interrupting the music playing from it. I ignored the messages and figured whatever it was could wait until I got to school. When I arrived, I noticed that something was off. The parking lot was full of cars, but no students. I mean, I knew it was a bit late in the day, but there were actually quite a few of us who would show up around the same time. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I just brushed it off and just assumed they had already made their way into the semi-warm school. So I decided to do the same. I grabbed my phone and my bag, locked my car, and walked into the lobby, only to be met with silence. Something wasn't right. I looked at my watch, and it was 10:36 a.m. The hall should have been full of students who had been rushing to get to their next class. I didn't understand why at the time, but for some reason, the emptiness of the halls made everything feel tense. I began to walk a bit down the hall. That was when I noticed that all the classroom doors were shut, which was odd because most of the teachers liked to keep them open, as long as it wasn't too loud in the halls. Then all of a sudden, I remember the spam of messages I had gotten on my way into school. I almost threw my phone with how hard I ripped it from my pocket. I put in my passcode and then came face to face with one of my biggest fears. My phone had 4 text messages from my friend who had been trying desperately to get in contact with me. The messages read in order: "Yo, something weird is going on. Hey man, are you on your way yet? Yo, don't come in." And the last message read: "Stranger in the halls. Teacher says he has a knife. Don't come in." My heart sank, and for a second, I couldn't catch my breath. Immediately, I began walking from one classroom to another, trying the handles on every door, but there was nothing. That's when I heard the sound of sneakers scuffing across the tile floor at the other side of the hall. I knew I had to hide, but I didn't have many options, so I threw myself behind a row of lockers and tried to tuck my legs in. The footsteps grew closer. They had definitely made it into the section of the hallway when all of a sudden they stopped. I'll never forget the sound of his gravelly voice when he said, "Is that a leg I see?" I panicked. I heard the footsteps start up again, growing closer with each passing second. I had to make a decision. I ran across the lobby of the school and threw open the doors to the auditorium. I didn't hesitate. Fight or flight kicked in, and it's like my legs knew where to bring me before I could even think of it. I ran all the way to the stage and made my way behind the curtain. As I tucked myself behind the curtain, I heard the door to the auditorium slam closed. He was inside the room with me. The footsteps drew closer and closer, with each step growing louder. I began to look around for another place to run, when all of a sudden I heard the sound of a door opening behind me. When I looked, I was relieved to see one of the custodians. He was ushering me over to him, but kept one hand to his mouth as to tell me, "Stay quiet." As quickly and quietly as I could, I ran over to him and the two of us hid, locked in a supply closet for what felt like forever, as we heard the man pacing back and forth across the stage. After what felt like an eternity, but turned out to be only a couple of minutes, police arrived on the scene and the man fled. I had to give my statement to one of the officers, who told me I was lucky to have found the supply closet. Apparently, the man was carrying around a large hunting knife, and the other officer said he doesn't know what would have happened if I had been caught by him. Do you know how some high schools are known for their football or their wrestling team? Well, mine was known for our swimming and diving team, of which I was the captain for my last 2 years. And every year like clockwork, we would wrap up the season with a fun little pool party at the school for just the teammates and their family members. Well, I had my own tradition, which was to do 100 laps in the pool before it closed each season. And every year, it went fine. I had spent most of my life swimming, so I was never worried that anything would go wrong in my school's pool. When I would attempt my yearly ritual during my senior year, however, I would learn that you never know when something is going to go wrong. So all my teammates had left, and I was going through my laps as usual, and I had made it up to lap 73. Everything was going great, when all of a sudden, as I pushed off the wall in the shallow side of the pool, I felt something smack me in the back of the head. I don't know exactly how long I was out for, but when I came to, I immediately began to panic. Someone had accidentally closed the mechanical pool cover while I was inside. There were about 8 inches between the water and the dark blue roof that was now hovering over me. The smell of chlorine had filled the air and breathing became hard. I slowly made my way from one side of the pool to the other in hopes that there would be a small crack or opening that I could pull myself out of, but there was nothing. It was at this point that I began to grow lightheaded, and any strength I had left was being used by my legs to keep me afloat. My eyes grew heavy, and the world around me was getting darker. The cool water almost felt nice as I slowly began to sink. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. One of the coaches must have seen me moving under the pool cover because she was able to get it open and pull me out before I had swallowed too much water. If she wasn't there that night, there is no way I would have made it out of that pool alive. I was sitting in my earth science class near the window, as I often did. I made it a point to get to all my classes early so I could get the best seat. That day, I would regret choosing to sit near the window though, as it would turn into a day that I would never forget. So I was just sitting there, doing my best to pay attention to the lesson, when something caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. I could have sworn that I saw something move near the tree line. When I looked again, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, so I just decided to go back to paying attention to the teacher. That was when I noticed it again. Only this time when I looked, I noticed that there was a grown man standing beside one of the pine trees that lined the field. He was just standing there in what appeared to be a dirt-covered clothing and a ski cap. I thought it was odd, so I raised my hand in hopes to bring it to the attention of my teacher. However, when we all turned to look out the window, there was no one there. The teacher told me to stop fooling around and just pay attention, so I did. I tried my best to wipe the entire experience from my mind. I finished out the school day and made my way home. I only lived about a half a mile from my high school, so I would usually walk home. I could have taken the bus if I wanted to, but I enjoyed the walk. I didn't enjoy it that day though. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling like I was being watched. I tried my best not to be suspicious about it, but I slowly began increasing my walking speed. After what seemed like 10 times the usual distance, I finally made it home. And as soon as my house was in sight, I sprinted across my lawn and into my front door. I locked the door behind me and began to fill my mom in on my experience. She was quick to write it off as just me being on edge and assured me that everything was fine. I tried my best to agree with her on that, but something in my gut wouldn't let me settle down. After a very long day, it had finally hit 10 p.m. and it was time for me to go to sleep. But sleep never came. Instead, I kept tossing and turning in my bed. I could swear that I still felt someone watching me. After a couple of hours passed, I had begun to drift off, when out of the nowhere I heard what sounded like scratching on the glass. I immediately turned to my window, where I could swear I saw the edge of someone's shirt as they tucked themselves behind the wall. Before I could react, I heard my mom yelling for me. I leapt across my room and ran through my door, slamming closed as I passed. When I made it to my mom's room, she told me to close the door. After I did, with no questions asked, she said someone is outside of the house. My heart began to race. The police are on the way, just stay in here. My mom pulled out her phone and opened up the security camera. The man wasn't there anymore, but at a closer look, we could now see that my bedroom window has been opened. It wasn't long before the police arrived, though it felt like hours. By the time they got to my house, whoever it was had left. As I began to tell the police officers about the man I had seen at school earlier that day, he said that he and his partner would search the woods to see what they find. When they returned, I was horrified to find out they had found what they said was a homeless person's campsite. They said they also found a small journal with drawings of my classroom window, and at the last page, he had written, "It's time." To this day, no one knows who that man was or where he went. All I know is our dog has been sleeping in my room ever since.